Welcome back. This is going to be a follow-up as a part 2 of our guiding tutorial. I felt like I didn't cover some of the stuff very good, and I want to make sure you guys understand what I'm going through on any mount that I guide. But this one's going to be kind of tailored to an AVX. Let's get this show on the road and start guiding. So I'm going to assume that you've watched the other videos and know to balance tail heavy, east heavy, and you know that predictive PEC should be on. And I'm going to assume that you know some of these things about guiding an AVX. Everything's kind of at the default here. We're just going to start off, and this isn't an AVX, but it's going to apply the same way. Let's do this. So our guiding is actually pretty good. Most people just be real happy with this. You can see we're guiding at around 0.64 arc seconds. Not making many corrections. Things are looking relatively good. If your image sampling is somewhere around, a little above the 0.65 arc seconds per pixel, you're probably going to be okay. But I always warn people to look down at the peaks. So, and we see this more often than not, the RA is generally the culprit here. This number right here is in arc seconds, and this number next to it is very important too because it represents the fractional pixels. This represents what the guide camera is seeing. So RA is down here around 0.10 in pixels. That's just pixels. We're going to look at these. Minmo I've got set at 20. I've noticed I'm not making a ton of corrections. We haven't hit our threshold or our high point of 0.5. We don't want to go over that. And we really don't want to go too much lower than, 0.2, 0.25, something like that. It means we're probably not correcting it enough. Most people would see this and just immediately leave it alone. If you look over at this bullseye, this is going to give you an idea. It shows the peaks of how your stars are going to look. And on an AVX, typically what you'll find is these peaks are kind of slanted in one direction or the other. Okay? So when you start seeing that, you'll notice these numbers are vastly different. Here they are not. But more often than not, these peaks will be well above your image sampling. And if you get enough of them collected out there, you'll get over the noise floor and you'll start elongating, even though your total RMS is below your image sampling rate. So how can we improve upon this? If our RA is at 0.13, we know 0.20 is giving it plenty of room. And really, these default settings for this particular mount's probably pretty good. Let's see what happens if we turn it too high. Because sometimes, or turn it too low, I guess, too tight. What I call too tight. Because oftentimes, I see a lot of people make this mistake. Let's just turn it down to 0.10, below what this number is here. And let's watch what it does. Some of this may take a minute for it to pick up. But for this test, I'm also, when I start guiding out, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zero this predictive part out. Because I want to see what my guiding is actually doing. You got to be careful with predictive PEC. This predictive weight. If you get that too high, and say for instance there's a little breeze or something come along, or you nudged it or something, well, it's going to remember that and think that that might be a pattern and try to correct for it later. And if your reactive weight can't overcome it and be like, whoa, dude, this ain't right, then you'll see this pattern happen. So getting the predictive weight too high is a bad thing to start with. So you can see we've came up to 0.44. We're still guiding at 0.11, but you'll notice my peaks drop just a little bit. So we're actually guiding tighter. We are guiding tighter. This is better guiding. Okay, just by adjusting this down real close. So, and on an AVX, you can't always get away with getting it this close. Whoa. Let's try 13. There was at 1. That may be as good as it gets. So it's just above it. It's issuing corrections. we're nudging up against the 0.5 here. We really don't want to go that route. So, but we do want to keep this as low as we can. So we haven't set our predictive PEC weight, or our prediction weights, and we're not going to just yet. For deck on an AVX, we want to have it have a large leeway, because to be truthful with you, under the algorithms, resist switch is what you want to be using, and you really don't want to be making very many corrections in deck at all. And some people actually even turn deck off. I mean, that's doable. So let's do 0.25. Okay. Now I need you to understand that this fractional pixels is going to be different for every guide scope combination. So if you put a different guide scope combination on, it may be, 0.50. You'll just have to watch this number over here and make sure you input the correct focal length and the correct data in so that it spits out the image sampling of the guide scope. Deck at 0.3, we kind of got it down a little. The aggression's probably pretty high. You can see I make a correction and it actually goes above it, comes back down, above it, come back down, above it, come back down, above it, come back down. So this kind of tells you that maybe the polar alignment isn't exactly super spot on, because it's generally wanting to trend downwards and it's just making it correct as it goes up. That's okay as long as it's only doing it in one direction. That's why sometimes having perfect polar alignment isn't actually a good deal. You kind of just want to make a few corrections here and there. I know that sounds counterintuitive to what the internet says, but sometimes being perfectly polar aligned is actually a bad thing for an AVX, which has a lot of declination and it's backlash. We will see that backlash come to roost when A, you haven't weighted it tail heavy or nose heavy, and B, when you are overcorrecting declination and the mesh of those gears now has to reverse course and try to go the other way. What you'll see is a series of red corrections, and then it'll get back and it'll be good for maybe, I don't know, anywhere from 10 seconds to 5-10 minutes, and it'll actually start correcting the other way. And essentially what that means is you're probably balanced a little too good, or you're just correcting deck too dang much. So by loosening up our declination, so like it's at 0.19, we want it at like 0.30, 0.35, so whatever this number is, it's going to be higher. Now RA, you can really tighten it down. You can get right on top of it. But always bear in mind that these two numbers need to be similar. So, me having said that, let me go 0.025. Let's try I got 2 points. 2.20. It's actually right above it. With this mount, it ain't going to matter. It's just not. But your deck aggression's almost always going to be 100%. And as you can see, we're still coming down. We're over our 0.55 now. That makes me want to back this number off a little. Even though we're good on our peaks, it just means we're going back and forth, and I'm starting to see a pattern here. Okay, but it looks like declination's actually our issue, as it's going up this axis and not this axis. But I do want to back this off here. Well, there it's coming back down. Let's go to 0.15. And our reaction weight, see, we got a up, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up. So it's kind of pretty much even, but this tells us we're kind of going on the up and down train. One way to bring that down, once we've got this number set and our graph just don't look like crap, we can, let's try moving this down to 50 instead of 60. And we should watch this number fall a little, because now we're not going after it near as hard. Meaning instead of trying to make 100% of the correction or 60%, we're just making 50%. So we should see more corrections in the same direction. And we do. We start seeing more ups and ups and ups. And here in a minute, we might see some downs and downs and downs. So at this point, we should start seeing our peak to peak come down here and level off. Notice our RAOSC has come down. Well, that means if that's coming down to there, I'm going to go ahead and tighten back up. Let's try this again and get it back down tight. So I'm just walking through my head what I do when I look at a guide graph and try to get it down pretty low. And as long as that don't go over 0.5 for most of the time, I'm okay. If it touches 0.5 and goes back to 0.4, I'm good with that. I'm good with that on an AVX. On a higher end mount, I would expect it to kind of maintain this level. So, well, I want a big event and deck there. So let's see if we can tighten deck down just a smidge. Well, you know what? I better not. Oof. Let me go like this instead. Let me go 70%. And let me tighten down to 0.19. Now on an AVX, this is probably going to be at 100, and you are going to be way above, like I said before, way above your deck. So if it was 15, I would expect to see like 0.30. Just because you do not want to be making corrections. At this point, what I'm doing is actually just trying to get the best guiding out of this particular mount. And this is where we're kind of towards the end of it. I've got it set above both of them or thereabouts. RA is 0.10, deck is 0.15. Let's try 0.17. Because I don't want to go chasing it around. What we're trying to do is just kind of corral it. Think of two players playing ping pong, and they're getting real close together, and they're just trying to tighten down and tighten down and tighten down. They don't want to go, you don't want to go chasing the ball out of a boundary. You don't want to get so close that you can't react to what's going on. But you want to get close enough to keep that ball as close to the net as you can. I know that's probably a really terrible way to look at it, but that's one way you could. So I'm looking here, and I'm seeing, it's pretty good. It's kind of shaped still towards the deck. So we can check, and we can kind of just start doing this with our predictive PEC. 50 is kind of the default, but oftentimes I'll run a little lower. I do want it to take that high frequency error out, but I don't want it to take so much out that my reaction weight can't overpower it. So I'm just going to start it at 40. And we're going to see what happens. Well, there goes my my peak, And who knows? Conditions. The thing of it is I'm not double. It's when you go getting double, you really start getting into trouble. And that's also why I try to, you notice this circle here, I try to get everybody to not image tighter than about 1 arc second with these mounts. And, some mounts that aren't, maybe they need tuned or lubed or whatever. Sometimes they need to be in this 1.5 bracket. You need to keep your circle in there. It just kind of depends. It varies from mount to mount. But typically speaking, your minmo on your deck will be much larger than the actual error because you don't want to make all these corrections. And this RA, these 0.11 on this particular setup, which is a simulator, you're going to start squeezing on it, and you're going to fiddle with these two numbers right here till you find something that actually works. And now you'll notice we're pretty close here. We're just, if we went any further, we would be chasing the scene. We'd be just, we're close to 0.5 on our RAOS, oscillation. We are under 1 arc second with both peaks and RMS. The only thing we can do now on higher end mounts, if you have a better mount, is switch to 1 second. That'll not, it does two things for an AVX. One, if you do have really bad scene, with multi-star guiding, and I'm single star guiding here, by the way, with multi-star guiding, it's not really near as big of an issue as it was. It wasn't really ever as big of an issue as people made it out to be. But with 1 second, you're just kind of smoothing the whole thing out. But what you got to realize is that you may be lying to yourself. Just because this graph doesn't pick it up and these numbers look good, this 0.55 and all this, well, those actually went up a little. Just because they look good doesn't necessarily mean your stars will be good. So here, what we can do is take a look at just a kind of a sample image I've got here. I just kind of grabbed one and threw it in here. We're going to go to image analysis and pull up this. And we're just going to check this one. This one shouldn't be great. So, okay. The medium full width half maximum is around 3.763 pixels. That tells me if you want to convert your sampling during this and figure that up, you can. And it kind of gives you an idea of what your full width half maximum is in arc seconds. But it can also be a misleading argument to just base photographs on that measurement, because as your stars get bloated, the arc seconds can be large, but they're actually just bloated, but they're round, see? So that's why we have the eccentricity ones. Now this MAD takes each individual one and compares it against each other. So if you have a scope with a bunch of field curvature, maybe your reducer's not quite right, but the center's fine, then you'll see these be pretty high. Generally speaking, 4 is a pretty round star. 0.4 is not terrible. You can get lower with higher end mounts, but once you get above 0.4, the further you go, the more you can tell. So let's go look at it. Let's go find a star and see how round it is. And if it's measuring these, you can see this one's pretty round, but it does have some more energy this direction. So we're getting down to nitpicky stuff here. And there's a lot of things like this here almost looks like some field curvature. Let's go on out. Let's go out to the corner of this old girl and see what she's got. That's a big bloated star. We don't even care about it. That one looks good. That one looks good. So each one of your images are going to be something different. Let's try another one. Here's a horsehead image, which I know the stars are elongated on a little bit. I kind of wanted to, get not perfect samples in here. So, and this is also a stretched image, so you can see the distribution of energy isn't exactly perfect. Well, also got a pinch optic there. There's a couple things you can determine when you're looking at some of these. These look pretty good out here. You can see I've got some pinch going on. Yeah, there's that pinch. Okay, so let's whoops. Let's go look at one of these. Oh yeah, these are way out of round. See, the distribution of energy is going this way. Now that's solvable. You can actually fix that with a PSF and go in and you want to deconvolve these and with a motion blur, and basically you can just target the stars with StarNet, and now it's even better, by the way. And you can just target your stars and work on them all by themselves, and you can actually cover some of that up. That's what allows a lot of really, really budget-oriented users who are really good processors to make phenomenal images, is essentially they'll shoot their stars separate. They'll actually shoot short subs for just the star color, make sure they're not saturated, and then they'll go long for the nebula. And if their stars, they want your stars to be good, don't get me wrong, but they'll let them blow out some, not a lot, but some. Or if they're not absolutely perfect, that's okay, because they can just fix it. That's part of the journey of processing, you learn. But the point in this is that when you actually measure this stuff on an AVX, what you'll find is 4.9 pixels and 0.49. And you can kind of get an idea of, you know, and the MAD's real low. So you can kind of get an idea of probably what it's catching on to is some of these elongations here. So I wanted to be sure I picked out something that wasn't flawless and perfect. But on the other hand, could someone use this data? Oh, yeah, I mean, it's got some bars here in the back. You can tell it's uncalibrated. You damn right. Heck yeah, someone can use this. I mean, absolutely. A lot of this will boil down to your seeing, how tightly you're sampled, and how good your guiding is. So don't get hung up on them too much. You know, in the end, they say round stars is all that matters. But if you want the best out of your equipment you can possibly get, you need to at least think about that. And that those measurements are what I'm talking about, where sometimes you'll see guide graphs that just look phenomenal, and they'll have, say, 3-second exposures on them or 4 seconds. And if we take all their subs and we all go measure them all, like, well, the wind blew a little bit here, there, okay. What you'll find, and unless they've finely tuned a higher end mount, an AVX just won't do that. Anything over about 1.5 seconds, an AVX has a really hard time coping with it. It's just there's too much harmonic error, and there's ways to deal with that. But from a mechanical standpoint. But the easiest way and the cheapest way on a stock AVX is just to guide very aggressively and control the boundaries in which it makes its corrections. And that's exactly what we're doing when we're adjusting the minmos and then setting the reaction weights and finally allowing predictive weights to come into play to help things out. I understand that your graphs ain't going to look this smooth. I've been letting this run in the background while I was doing the little Pix Insight thing, and we're just consistently staying under 1 arc second. Now, if I go and switch this to 2 seconds per se and make a few adjustments, I could guide in hysteresis and smooth my graph out. I might be able to actually even get lower numbers. But what I've always said is what truly matters is when you take those photographs into your processing software, what do those stars, how big are they and how messed up are they? Because that's what we're ultimately after. You get finer detail in your nebula, you're going to get better star data, it's going to be easier to process. That's why we guide. So always try to keep the endeavor for good guiding. Don't settle. You know, if you know that it can be improved a little bit, it will improve your pictures. Again, I could manipulate this and lie to it and probably put a better graph up here. But the truth is, it's just not going to matter when we go to measure them, okay? Not unless you've got a really high-end mount, and I'm talking Mach 1s, 10 microns, things like that, okay? All right, that's really all I got. I'm sure there's a ton that I missed. Oftentimes, I'll disable deck. Like if I'm having a nasty problem and I just can't figure it out, I just want to figure out one axis at a time. Or sometimes deck and RA will move together, and you're like, what the heck? And I've kind of gone over some of the remedies for those in my other guide videos. But I really wanted to do this part 2 because I think people get confused. Ignore the arc seconds. Watch the pixels, and because that's what these minmo adjustments are utilizing. I'm glad you guys tuned in. If you stayed to the end of this, I'm proud of you. I probably would not have. Till next time.